So when your cat gets lost, your dog goes missing, or your pet is stolen, whom do you call? South Florida Jamie Katz, pet detective. She's a little bit of Sherlock Holmes, some Jessica Fletcher, a lot of Hercule Poirot, and of course, there's always the beloved Nancy Drew. Jamie, thanks so much for joining us on the Pet Buzz.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. I'm really excited that you're here. I was doing a lot of research. I came across your name and I thought, that's my kind of girl. Somebody in action. I was loving that. So I got to ask you, what prompted you to become a pet detective? It's not like the average profession.
Yeah, I got scammed.
You got scammed. Tell me about it.
So my old neighbor from like 7, 8 years ago, her cat went missing. And I was on Craigslist trying to see if I could, if somebody had found her. And I saw this ad and it said, we're private investigators. We find lost dogs, cats, and gerbils, and we use tracking dogs. And my first thought was, that is so stupid. And my second thought was, all right, well, I have to call them. And so I contacted them and they said they were on their way. They're loading the dogs in the truck. And a few hours went by and they then still never showed up. And so I called her back and she said, oh, 95 was shut down. And I said, okay, well, you're in Boca, go around. And she was like, yeah, no, I'll be there at 9 a.m. the next morning. 9 a.m. came the next morning. She called, said she was on the way. She never showed up again. She did the same thing the next day, called again at 9 a.m., said she was on the way, never showed up. And I was already interning as a private investigator for People at that time. And so I started looking into it. We found Honey on the third day in the house next door, underneath that house in a crawl space. But I said, well, if this is real, I'm going to do this forever. And I started researching it and it was real.
That's just so crazy. I mean, and whatever happened to that pet private detective? He never showed up?
No, they never showed up. But she did say to me once we found Honey, she said, oh, so how did you find her? So I could use it for tips for the next case I have. So
wow.
Yeah, I never saw them ever advertise again. I've never even heard of the company ever again.
That's crazy. And then, okay, so you decide this is the profession for you. From what I understand from doing my research, you always had animals.
Always.
They always, and some of them, even if I guess the amount of animals always affected your living situation when you were living back with your dad. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely.
So what do you have to do? What formalities do you have to do? Do you have to do like the same things that other private detectives go through? I mean, do you have licensure, test, insurance, all that stuff?
Yeah, so I'm licensed. You have to go through the classes, you have to take the test, you have to be licensed, you have to do an internship. If you have a criminal justice degree, the internship is a year less.
Okay.
Did have a criminal justice degree, so I had a year less internship. But yeah, it's the same steps. It's the same exact license. There's nothing different about it. I just focus on pets, lost pets. That's just what I.
Okay, so you mentioned tracking dogs. So I'm just curious, what's in your toolbox? I mean, what do you use to find lost, missing, and stolen pets?
The first thing I do is I go over the who, what, when, where, why questions with them and see what service they actually need. Do they need an awareness campaign or do they actually need tracking dogs? It really all just comes down to, the case, and every case is different, although they're all the same, but they're all different. So
well, I'm going to take a step back because you kind of, so how do your clients find you? I mean, obviously, you're big time. I've read tons of press about you. Do they know you from the paper? How do they find you? Just doing the research on the computer?
Yeah. Well, I ask every person how they hear about my services, and it's either Google, Facebook, a friend, the news.
Let's get back to the toolbox.
Sure.
So you got your tracking dogs, right?
Yeah. So I have Gable and I have Fletcher.
Mm-hmm.
They're specific tracking dogs. It's actually called a trailing dog, but nobody knows what that is, so we call them tracking dogs.
Okay.
But what they do is I give them the scent article of the missing pet, and what the dogs do is build a perimeter of how far scent travels. So once we have that perimeter of how far scent travels, we blow up the sign campaign, making it impossible for anybody to come in or out of a certain mile radius of how far the scent travels. So that way, if you make it impossible for anybody to come in or out of a certain mile radius of where that pet went missing and from where that scent stops, you're going to make it impossible to not get information if somebody saw something, if somebody witnessed, the animal, or have a sighting, or knows who the animal's with, or whatever the situation is. So that's really what it comes down to with the tracking dogs. But there's a lot of other, different stuff too, but that's primarily what they do.
And then on these signs, obviously you put a picture of the lost pet. Do the people call you, like your 1-800 number, like call Jamie?
No, my owners, they're always, their phone numbers on the signs. I've only done it a couple times where my number was on there, but it's just so many calls that are coming in, and so many things. The owners do run their own cases.
Okay.
I set up for them. I make them the sign. I tell them where they go. Anytime they get calls, they call me, and I walk them through every call. So they have the best guidance, the best tools. They don't get scammed by anybody. It's less frantic. I literally just tell them what to do as the calls come in. And based upon the info that we get, is what I'm going to do.
Tell us about, like, for example, a recent case that you worked on.
So I just had a case a few weeks ago for a dog named Clovey. She is a Yorkie. She went missing in West Park during a thunderstorm, like Hollywood, Florida. And she was found by a woman who saw her running down the street, and she started to follow her in her car. And she eventually was able to catch up to her, and Clovey jumped in the car with her. And from then, the woman didn't know what to do with her. So she started looking up shelters that were closest to her. And the closest shelter was the North Miami Beach Humane Society. So she drove to the Humane Society thinking that she could surrender her. But when she got there, they were closed. And from at that moment, nobody knew who she was at that moment. But my client did a little bit of digging himself and found a few surveillance videos, and finally was able to catch up with the car, the woman's car, got the tag number, got it to the police. The police contacted her, and she said that when she got to the shelter that they were closed, and there was another woman there who was surrendering her dog in a black SUV. And the woman said, "Oh, well, I'll just come back and bring your dog with me when they open tomorrow." And so the woman, the finder, said she left the dog with the woman at the Humane Society outside with a black SUV.
Right. So, who was going to surrender her dog the next day, supposedly with the poodle. Okay. Then what happened? So they hired me, and we got surveillance footage that day from the North Miami Beach Humane Society. And I saw the videos, and she left the dog in the parking lot. She actually kicked the dog out of her car. And there was a black SUV there that came after she couldn't get the dog out of her car. And they tried to use their dog to lure Clovey out of the car. And, when that didn't work, they started to use a handbag and try to hit it from one side to the other out of the car. And then finally, the woman in the black SUV just went to the passenger seat and picked the dog up and put her outside and left her there. And they both drove away. Well, did these two women know each other? I mean... It looked like they did. It definitely looked like they knew each other. It looked like she was in the parking lot and she called her to come help her. That's just unbelievable. What I find so crazy about that story is the fact that she did pick up the dog, but only to take it to the Humane Society and dump it out. I mean, what did she think? What was she thinking? I mean, it couldn't have been a big Yorkie. Yorkies are small dogs. Yeah, small dog. I'm not defending anybody in any way, but she did stop to help the dog. She did end up having to really chase this dog down. But it does suck that, as soon as she realized that she couldn't leave the dog there, that she also abandoned the dog. So it stinks the way that it happened. And I think that's, kind of something that happens to a lot of people. They try to help a situation and then they end up feeling stuck themselves. And again, I'm not dismissing what she did, but that's how it happened. A successful rescue. Katz on the job. Jamie Katz, pet detective on the job. So give us another story. Tell us another tale of a pet that you found. That's so crazy. I mean, I'm sorry, Jamie. That is just so crazy. No, they crazy. Find the dog and then they throw it out at the Humane Society. I mean, what did they think? It was going to stay in the parking lot overnight and wait for the doors to open?
I don't think they cared at that point. I think it was just they were done with their good deed of the day, and that was it.
Okay, so maybe the lesson to be learned, if you're not going to follow through, don't pick up a dog by the side of the road.
Right. And yeah, and that, yeah, and it's crazy, but I actually had it happen to me about 2 weeks later. So this just happened a couple weeks ago. Actually, it was my neighbor that it happened to, but I ended up getting involved in it. And she was driving in Sunrise, Florida, and she sees this little pit mix in the middle of traffic, about to get hit by a car, and she picks it up. And then 8 o'clock, calls me 8 o'clock in the morning, begging me for help. And I come outside and I start helping her, and the dog has no chip. She's got scars all over her body, all over her face, all over her neck. And the shelters right now aren't taking dogs. Rescues are full. It's really hard to find somebody to foster. You want to try to find the owner of an animal, but now you're dealing with an animal that's been abused and neglected. It smelled like a dumpster. And we finally, we got it clean, got her clean. I finally was able to find her a rescue. And then we followed the steps, which is the laws in Florida. You have statutes, and you can't find lost property and give it away. You can't find lost property, not tell anybody. And so there was a report that was done to the shelter, and the owner found her after she was about to be on her 5th day for a stray hold. And the owner actually came looking for her, and we got the police involved, and the police made us give her back. Even though she was scarred, her whole entire face was scarred, her neck was scarred, her whole body. And the cop said, well, that's not how I would treat my dog, but it's his dog.
Wow.
So, that's just a little example of exactly Chloe's situation that me and my own neighbor went through, where what do you do with a dog when you find it and you can't bring a dog into your house and the shelters aren't taking dogs? What do you do?
What would you say your success rate is?
So right now we're at a 67% rate. But I say the same thing to every single person I speak with, because they always ask me this. I tell them the 67% doesn't matter if you're not going to be involved 100%.
Right.
So anybody in the world can hire me, but just because you hire me, just because you pay money, it doesn't mean you're going to find your pet. You have to put the work into it. If you don't put the work into it, there's no point in hiring me.
I think that's a great point. Now, Jamie, because there are so many pet parents out there, and we always tell them the same thing: make sure you have tags on the dog that have a current cell phone number, because we all are on cell phones these days. Make sure your microchip information is up to date. What can you add to that advice so that people don't have pets go lost, missing, or stolen?
I use the Whistle Go Explorer in all my dogs. It's a little GPS that goes on their collar. It lasts 3 weeks battery life.
Mm-hmm.
And if your dog does get out of the perimeter that you set around your living space or your yard, you'll get a text within 4 to 5 minutes, and then you could track your animal live. That's something to make you feel a little bit more safe with it. But I would say don't leave your animals outside alone. Don't let them go out by themselves. If they're out in the yard, you go with them. If keep them inside. Anywhere in the world, it's just not safe to let your animals out unattended like that. But you have predators, and I like to call people predators too. So
Sure.
Keep your animals safe and go with them.
I mean, so many people consider pets as family members, so you want to do everything you possibly do to protect them. I mean, I had worked on the prototype to Whistle, which was actually the technology. A lot of it was developed by Qualcomm, and that was quite a few years ago. But no, I mean, if you want to have a dog, you want to keep it safe. Sometimes it's just like kids. You have to make the investment and buy those GPS trackers. I mean, they're not all, I mean, there's lots of options for GPS trackers. Some actually track your pet in real time, and you can whip out your phone and see where it's going. And those are great. Some of them let you set up a barrier. They have all sorts of bells and whistles, like temperature control. It's funny. I just got a new ADT alarm system at my house. And they said the contract was for 3 years. I go, 3 years? I mean, I might not be here. They said, oh, well, it's okay, because you can pick it up and take it with you. You know what I mean? So it's just, that's what's so great about all this stuff. And we live in a world now where since the pandemic, a lot of us are working from quote unquote home, but home can be anywhere. You could go to Colorado and ski in the wintertime and then be here for, the season or, the spring. So, I mean, a GPS tracker is few bucks, depending on what you get, a few bucks a month, right? And maybe an initial investment of like what, 150 bucks, if that much.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's totally 100% worth it. I would say microchips 100% too. Of course, you can't track a microchip, but if somebody finds your pet or takes it to get scanned or takes it to a vet and doesn't even know it's microchipped and they scan your dog, then, you have a chance of being able to get that information. So yeah, anything to increase your chances of finding your pet, to not lose your pet, it's all worth it to me.
67%. I mean, that's an incredibly high rate. And, there are a few people out there around the country who claim to be pet detectives, but I really, just from the reading I did about you, it was just the passion that came, the big smile and the passion that came through in all those articles. And I mean, you're a Florida girl. I'm a Florida girl now, but I was just like, I got to get her on the show. And now I got to get you back.
Anytime.
Thanks for viewing our content on Pet Buzz Plus.